Excellent. Well, let's dive in then. So I'm Eric Longo, I'm Executive Director of MCN. I'm here with Don Youngberg, who you all know. Don is a board member, and this session is about the big ideas recap. So today was really about, a bunch of different sessions that were not kind of fit into the functional tracks that we've explored throughout October. And I attended two sessions. We will talk about also like the conversation with Portia and Nikhil. And then I attended two sessions, the Pandemic Era Video Showcase and Critique, and It's Not a Companion, One Story, Two Exhibitions about the Rohingya genocide US Holocaust Memorial Museum show that they did. And I think, Don, which one did you attend?
Yeah, I attended the mythology session, Mythology of Museums. It was great. And I also attended the Lost Jobs theater piece that was unbelievably poignant to me, and also so well done, so well done. So very excited to kind of hear people's views on all the sessions today, as well as Portia's keynote. We're blessed today with so many great, big, and kind of gnarly topics. And
totally.
And the people who've showed up this week, week number 5 or 6, or depending on how you count it. Exactly. Bless you. And passionate people. So we're really here to talk with you, or let you share with us, share with all of us your thoughts. The only caveat that I'll have in here is, remember that some of the sessions, at least one of the sessions, was Chatham House rules. So we want to make sure we still are honoring that. I think we open the floor and ask for feedback on any of the sessions that you attended today.
37 participants. This is exciting. Jump in. This is really, we're not here to dictate what the key learnings are, from what we've heard today. It's really about what you heard and what you felt was missing. What points of views, perspectives, ideas would have made for stronger or outcome. So jump in, please. This is your conference, our conference. Who's this? I recognize. Oh, Max. Hi, Max.
Yeah. The keynote of Portia and Nikhil was fantastic. I mean, I'm sure everybody pretty much hands down agrees. And there was a thought in the thread about, in the chat about, like, what do you do when people how can you, like, convince people who are passionate about CRT stuff to be, like, less aggressive or something? I can't remember what the phrasing was. I think it was Robin Whiteowen who phrased that question. And I just know from like my wife does research in science communication, and it's known in the research that when you try to convince somebody that they're wrong, that literally makes them, like, hold fast to their own position. So I really appreciated what Dr. Moore had to say about, well, no, I just keep going on this own mission, right, of what I'm doing, and I really would like to cheer that thought on, in terms of, like, what we all do as practitioners in the face of some challenges that you really want to lean hard into the things that you're doing that are productive, right, rather than trying to change somebody else's mind, because you're never going to do that. Also, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I agree with you, Max. The keynote was great. And I didn't get a chance to see all of the sessions afterwards that I wanted to, but I'll go back and watch the videos. But I agree with the point that you were making too, that I feel like there's always been kind of it's like a burden almost on me, that I feel like I need to make this effort to change minds, and kind of having permission to not continuously struggle with that, and to just really focus my energies where they can be more productive and actually make progress. it's kind of like the relief of a burden to hear other people say that and to kind of give me permission to put my energies where I think that they are more valuable.
It's a big one.
Rachel has your hand up.
Yeah, Rachel.
Yeah, I think I also, I mean, that was similar to what Max and Kelsey were saying. I really appreciated that point. And I also wanted to kind of like lift back into this conversation Nikhil's response to it, which was don't make it about centering the people who are causing the harm, which is pretty much what you end up doing if you try to convince the people who are causing the harm that they shouldn't. So I also appreciated that Nikhil kind of added that reminder of like the people who have been marginalized in these situations are the people that we should be making the efforts to center, rather than spending more time on the perhaps loudest voices, but not most productive voices.
Yeah, Portia said, if you agree that museums are not neutral, then what are we? I think that's a question we've been trying to answer at MCN, among other many forums in the museum community for a number of years. Do you have any reactions to that, anyone? Thought that was an interesting question.
I think it kind of goes back to the point in the keynote about how museums have been reacting with the, you know, the Twitter statements and things like that. I think that because we're not neutral, we do have to kind of establish, okay, then what are we and how are we going to use our influence, you know, for good, I guess. And but trying to make the statements like really back them up with action, so that we can, you know, establish museums as a, you know, non-neutral power to better the, you know, the conversation and open and make space, rather than being non-neutral in a more destructive way.
Thanks,
I
Kelsey.
really liked that question from the keynote and what everyone's shared here. It's I think of this moment in the history of museums as, you know, an untruth has been exposed. Right? It's like you learn something about your family that is shocking and like stands everything you thought you knew on end. And now you have to decide what you're going to be with this new piece of information. Museums are not neutral. What? Now what? And I think museums are trying to explore that, but having really no idea what that means. And a lot of museums are museums, you know, what museums are, that thing. And they're unable to define really what a museum is. And then if they're not that, then what are they? So there's like many, many big, difficult questions.
Thanks, Erin. Alice.
I think one of the things that Portia said this morning was about how she reacted when her mother would take her to the museum as a child. And I think thinking about a museum as a window to both the past and the future, and understanding it's has the ability to expose people to the past and the future through a window, might make all sides more comfortable.
Yeah, thanks, Alice. There's just as a prompt here, there's a couple of other things that Portia said, and I don't want to make this entire session about Portia, obviously, but one of the things she said was, we need to reimagine what museum professionals can be and what institutions can be. But I was interested in this. Obviously, institutions are made up of people, us, museum workers. I was interested in if you had any ideas about reimagining what museum professionals can be means to you, and also in relation to the excellent question that I think Nikhil asked Portia, which was like, you know, why do you work in museums? And her which goes back to what Alice just said about her experience being brought to museums when Portia was a child. So reimagine what can museum professionals can be. Any thoughts on that?
If somebody else wants to go, I don't want to dominate talking. But I was thinking kind of to the statement about the museum whose, you know, Twitter was like, we're going to make mistakes and we're going to be wrong. I think museum professionals can be kind of leading examples of how to be vulnerable in that way. Because I know a lot of times museums are seen as kind of authorities on knowledge and authorities. So it's hard, I think, for somebody who's supposed to have answers to say they don't know and they don't have answers. But I think if museum professionals can kind of, you know, help you fight the taboo about being wrong or vulnerable or making mistakes, and really kind of lead by example with trying to be better, even if we mess up, we'll learn and continue growing, and kind of set that example, that would be really powerful coming from people who are supposed to provide answers.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Kelsey. Thank you, Rachel, for your comment here. It's a concern I have been very worried about, the loss of many in our field that are leaving the sector for other sectors or better paid jobs, which we can't blame them. Carrie.
Yes, this is a little bit related, you know, to Rachel's comment, thinking about, you know, our project that we talked about in our session today is a grant-funded project, and a lot, you know, thinking about what museums are. We are certainly a collection of, you know, individuals, but there's also like a large amount of money and institutional power that I think is at play. And so I think that it's really important to, you know, have conversations, you know, as museum workers on, you know, on the ground, but to try as best we can to sort of funnel that up and use our power to sort of, you know, think about how we can put pressure on the folks who are making decisions about who to hire and what positions to fund. I think that's an important piece of it, because GLAM jobs are quite often very precarious. And yeah, to Rachel's comment, yeah, folks are sort of leaving, but there's also, you know, there's an opening to talk about what we value in terms of like broader institutional priorities. And institutions can often be very conservative, and that's something, you know, even if the people who work there are, you know, hoping to affect change. So that's just something that I've been thinking about quite a lot in my early career. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Carrie. Marta.
Hello, everybody. So I think museum professionals could be facilitators, you know, because you are working in a museum, you know the story of this object, maybe from in a point of view of, you know, because you have been cataloging this object, of you know scientifically this object, but maybe you are in a community that maybe is someone from this culture, belonging to this culture, that can explain some hidden stories for you, or can be explain a story that can move somebody else. And then this is I think the most important thing. But when you are working with people, with visitors, with other people that can explain you new stories to complete the story of this object you have been curating or preserving in the museum, I think.
Thanks, Marta. Anyone else want to chip in on this? Any other reactions to other sessions rather than Portia? Oh, Rachel, sorry.
I had a question. It was about another session, actually. It was
Great.
I was in the Mythologies and Museums session for a little while, and then I had to jump out to get ready for my own. But Bruce put in the chat, it was ACME in Australia. They had kind of a new plan, which I did not click on the link, and then I left the meeting, and I was wondering if anyone had that link. It was, he was saying that basically Seb Chan at ACME in Australia had just kind of released a quite thoughtful, more progressive plan for how to take care of museum workers as their institution moves forward. And I don't know if anyone here got that link, but it was something I wanted to read, and it sounded like good movie. Thank you. Thanks,
it's
Don.
not the, is it the okay.
Don just put the link in the chat. Thank you. I have it to read,
okay.
but it was also just like giving me hope that there was sort of like an institution-wide, like more progressive set of values coming out. So thank you.
Okay, very good. Good. I thought you were talking about the, they have a CEO digital mentoring program that they've recently launched, which is also a very interesting, I'm putting the link here, a very interesting program. Thank you, Rachel. Tim, did you want to mention something? I wonder if this sense of getting out needs to be situated within a context of devalued. Yeah, it's a good point.
Hi, Eric, and kia ora, Rachel, and everyone else. Yeah, no, it was just sort of reflecting on that point, and I apologize I wasn't in the main session, but I was just reflecting on the comment you made in chat, Rachel, of you know, people leaving, and this is sort of going, and I think across, you know, there's different articles of the Great Reckoning in terms of work post-pandemic, I think across many sectors, but I was also just reflecting on a personal experience of walking away from public education after almost 15 years in it. And I guess in a broader sense, I was reflecting on, I'm now inside the National Library of New Zealand, and I know there's a lot of pressures and tensions in that space, library spaces and stuff, and cultural heritage, but what is that sense of, whilst I think as a profession, there's a really positive work, and it's been on display at this conference around how we share the value of what we do. What is the residue, I suppose, of 30 years of efficiency and neoliberalism and a very focused economic way of thinking about the value of things now starting to burn people out? And that's a wider context than just museums. That's all across public sector and the value of public good. I think, I mean, here in my country, obviously, nursing is under pressure, and it's the same thing. You know, it just becomes the same thing of how much people can take and what they need to walk away from for their own safety. And I don't have anything to offer other than that wider reflection of how all of this is interlinked. So yeah, I'll stop there. But thank you.
And to that point, Tim and Carrie in the chat too, I mean, that was, I don't know if Ali is still, Ali was like joining this session, but she is also trying to work. So she said, oh good, you're still here, Ali. Like, I think that was one of the things, like when we were interviewing people for the Lost Jobs, Found Voices documentary theater project, like that was one of the really recurring things, was people just saying like, I can't give as much like emotional energy to my job as I have had to / wanted to, but that's just not sustainable. So that was certainly a common thread.
Yeah, and I think for me, oh, sorry. I-
Go on,
I've-
Tim. Go on.
I think for me, the choice I made to walk away was I knew what it. I love teaching, and I would imagine that people across this board would love what they do in their spaces. But I could see myself in it, but I also knew what it would cost me, and I had to make a call that I couldn't pay that cost. And that's kind of what it boiled down to. And I'll stop there. But I just want to say, Kia ora, Ellie. It's awesome to see someone with the last name. I never see my last name. That's just weird. That's so cool. Anyway, I'll stop.
I also had the same thought the first time I saw you pop up on Slack, so I'm glad that we finally get to meet. But I think going back to some of our previous discussion, one of the quotes that we highlighted from one of our participants in our session was, "Where do we go from here? How do we step lightly into the future?" And I think I wasn't able to hear the keynote this morning, but from reflecting on our discussions of it and reflecting on this, I almost feel it's this moment of this, we're experiencing this great reckoning as a society and as a professional field, but now what comes next?
What comes next?
So I want to chime in. I also went to the mythology session, and Rachel, thank you for asking for that link. And the comment I'm going to have on it is, as far as I can tell, it was like the most tangible example of somebody actually doing something. We all talk about things, we pilot things, we create papers on things, we talk about intentions of things, and this was this clear as a bell ringing, like, here Acme did this. And bless Seb for sharing it with the world or whatever, but that's a very bold thing. And so when we're asking that question, what next, I just find a little hope in that somebody actually took a real tangible step. And that's hard. That's not my style of thing, to be really honest, but to see that. So while it was just this little link out there, it's a great example. I haven't read it yet, but the fact that they published it for, I think it was from 2020 to 2024, that's their policy. So that's fabulous.
Any other topics that you'd like to bring up from some of the sessions that you attended today?
Well, I attended the one about sharing collections management system among the 5 colleges in Western Mass, and and I put in the chat there like, oh, this is fascinating, because the history of MCN starting as the Museum Computer Network, that was a shared registration system, right? And that was the kind of goal. And then over the past few years, I've been hearing people talking about, oh, well, that was never solved, right? Like once the mainframe thing was done, it was like, well, okay, now this is the network, right? But they've been working on that project since 1995, and they're doing really some amazing work with it, like trying to figure out all the indigenous collections they have, and figuring out how these systems can sort of talk to each other a little better, even though they have been set up, but they have a lot of kind of sort of blind spots that the system was designed in such a way where you couldn't see certain information, but you could see other information from the other areas. So they're still working through that stuff. But yeah, I know I see Erin here and Sydney, and I think I saw Hillary from that session. So kudos to you all for a great session. That was really cool.
Thanks. I attended the other session about what do collections online look like? What is a collection? It was a campfire session, and I've just been sort of struck throughout today that we get together in conferences to talk about work that is often parallel or big concepts that we all want to work toward, but our institutions are terrible at working together. We, as individuals, are interested in collaborating, but institutionally, it's every man for himself, and we need to differentiate ourselves in the marketplace and down with the competition. And I wonder if we will move beyond that sometime.
That's a very, I mean, I've heard that one before
Mhm.
in recent months, and the lack of cross-institutional collaboration. I don't know if it's fear that's branding, and any thoughts on that from museum workers or what's left of us?
It's a race to the bottom.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
There-
Like
it's-
collaborating
it's-
with other museums?
I don't have any like great profound thoughts, but just from kind of like observations in the field generally, there seems to be such a, it's like collaboration that happens is on a kind of like individual staff person or individual programmatic level. Maybe it's an exhibition that travels to multiple places, and so they have a team of staff in multiple places that work together on that exhibition, or it's a program or a web offering that includes material from multiple institutions, so multiple institutions work together on that thing. But it's like it's still all in this kind of siloed individual way, and I think that that it's like that model is never going to encourage museums to be more collaborative in a larger way if it's always like a sense of, well, we're kind of in competition for like visitors with other museums in our area, and then also like online visitors who might want to be talking about the same kind of collections that we have, and then I guess we'll work together over here on this one thing, but then we go back to being in competition. And I don't know how, again, like without kind of larger institutional and systemic changes, how that changes.
The thing that's absolutely mind-blowing about this whole idea is that museums are the most, and I say this a lot, so pardon me if you've heard this a million times from me, great research on organizational theory that museums are the most isomorphic type of organization. So the longer they exist, the more and more they become like each other. They're very interested in copying what the other person has already done. Yeah,
And
are
yet
not interested in
indifferent.
working together.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I teach in museum studies courses that the collaborators of the competitors to museums are streaming platforms. They're not each other, right? And so like and that you have to have a shift in thinking about this whole competitor collaborator thing to include other institutions like your own, rather than other partners that don't do what you do. So in addition to others that don't do what you do, but like you really like, and hopefully, I'm teaching enough people that those people, at least one of them will be a director somewhere, and they will make that decision and understand that fully, that like they can actually start to work with other organizations.
Yeah, Francis Lloyd Baines just put a comment. Is it that we often follow an academic model of holding tight to our content, so that we can be the first to publish it, present, and share it? Amen to that. Yes, it's very so I'll tell you a little story here. The Association of Art Museum Curators, AAMC, has a really strong membership in terms of numbers, and it was very funny to me to realize that all of their content is behind a paywall. And I thought, what an analogy to, I hope there's no curators among you today, but what an analogy to a curator's doors office being closed. And I mean, I see, a bunch of you laughing here, but we've all been there, right? And so I think your observation, Francis, is point on. You know, I think we're often fashioned by our training, right? And so that's what questioning, I think, is really important. Questioning our assumptions and having a reflective look on ourselves and our institution is so important. Maybe these are the skills that we need more, right? To look at ourselves from a different angle. We've like about 15 minutes left, and great attendance today. I think there's like 35 of us in this room, which is really great. Any other things you'd like to bring up and topics?
And this may be useless, but I'll say it anyway. The one organization that has the ability to convene the leadership of the institutions to perhaps spurn collaboration is the NEA. Yeah, I mean, you knew I was going to say that.
Full disclosure, Alice is my neighbor next door, and she's worked in philanthropy for many years. So we've had this conversation many times, and glad you bring this up. I was going to say that I think funders, as Alice just brought it up, could be a catalyst for cross-museum collaborations. Yeah.
Exactly. And because not only do they fund the institutions themselves, but remember that they also fund the insurance that underwrites the movement of exhibitions from place to place. So, but in order to get them to do that, I think that the only way would be ground up pushing. And Rachel, I agree with you. I started out by saying this may be ridiculous, but but I think that that's the only way to bring about systemic change. And the NEA is the only funder that really, touches institutions large and small.
Yeah, I'm not a funding expert, but I think there's always been more funding dedicated to projects, which is encouraged, especially in our field. I'm not talking about other museum disciplines, right? But I think in our field, it's always been about like, oh, let's fund a project for mobile apps or visitor engagement. Big thing. And so of course that the reaction, if you ask for proposals around those things, what do? You get museums to showcase case studies, right, and their best work, and that in effect spurns competition. And they have and this whole idea that then we go to conference like these or NW or others where we're like, hey, ta-da, we did it, and as opposed to wanting to move the sector into a direction that has more of a cross-sector impact. I don't think, is Coven in the room? No. Coven is not in the room. Yeah, overhead. Can we talk? Yeah. Any other, like, we have 10 minutes left, and I think Don left because we're starting a speed networking session, the last one of this marathon we did this year. Thank you for still being with us. Yeah, we have 10 minutes. Bring anything up.
To Don's point about like, doing something about something, I just want to amplify the voices of Ali and Rachel and Amosa for actually doing that, making that project happen, because again, that's an example of well, we have this whole situation. What are we going to do about it? And I mean, quite honestly, to make an expression and create art out of it is like, you might not think that's the best. You may not think the best thing to do with it, or it's not enough, or whatever. But I mean, that's to me, that's a very big step, right? To actually take these stories and do something with them. So I applaud you all for taking on that project, and thank you for all the emotional work that you put into that, because it's not insignificant.
Thanks, Max.
Thanks, Max. Really appreciate that.
I'm going to throw something out there. I loved what Portia said. It's not taboo to go back and get what's left behind. Any reactions to that?
I actually that was another one that I like wrote down in my notes from what she was talking about. And that
Yes.
I think I had like this theater project with Ali on the brain because we were about to go present it. But when she said that, I was sort of feeling like that was a huge reason that I think Mimosa and I initially responded to Ali when she tweeted that, where it was sort of like, okay, in all of this talk about like, here are the numbers of people being laid off or resigning or retiring, people leaving the field, like there was all of this kind of like quantitative data and like hand wringing, but it was sort of like, okay, well, where are the stories of the people who have been through that? And like each of the three of us had such stories, like such emotional, personal stories, that it was sort of that spirit of like, let's not just like move forward and leave behind all of those individual experiences. So that was it. I will say, like, for me, at least, that was a big motivator, was like not leaving those behind.
I think as much as we all would like to never think about the last 20 months of our lives again, I think like the rest of our lives as a society, as institutions, as people who lived through this traumatic thing, the rest of our lives becomes what dealing with this and how we deal with this. And I think, you know, avoidance is one strategy, but it becomes a choice of how we move forward with the rest of our lives, having lived through the collective trauma of the past.
I also, did somebody have their hand up?
Erin, sorry, I didn't see you.
Oh, sorry,
Go
yeah.
ahead, go ahead.
I also absolutely loved that. And I had to go back and get it. I had to exit right after to get ready for my own session. But part of the work that I'm doing right now is going back into, very old exhibition files. Back when an exhibition was a curator wanders into a storage room, picks some paintings, clips out little, tombstone labels and sticks them on the wall, and the exhibition changes every 30 days. And now exhibitions cost millions of dollars. And I was sort of going through these files at the same time as museums were laying people off and complaining about how their endowment value had gone down, and they, just financial hand wringing and wondering where our priorities went. Is there anything fundamentally wrong with an exhibition that does not offer new scholarship? That is, let's just get some art out of storage and put it on the wall. If it's going to cost the annual salaries of 10 people, do we need to do it? Like what's the goal? Is it to look better than other museums? I don't know. So that's what I was thinking about, like in service of innovation, what have we left behind? That maybe service life was not over.
Yeah. Thank you, Erin. on a related and not related note, I attended the It's Not a Companion, One Story, Two Exhibitions session, which I thought was really interesting. What an incredible project. I had the great opportunity and chance to be in Israel a couple of years ago. And of course, I went to Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, and which obviously really moving site. And I had wished at the end that they would have opened the conversation to other genocides as a way to raise awareness that these horrific acts still happen every day today. So I just want to applaud here the US Holocaust Museum for having had the courage to feature the genocide of another minority as a way to tell the story of oppression, because I thought that was really inclusive in ways of not, that the story of the Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust, is alas not the only one, and it still goes on today. And there are so many others whose stories have not been told. So that was a courageous step in the right direction, I think, unrelated to what we've been talking about, but related. Okay, we have like 4 minutes. So any last thoughts, or and if you don't have any last thoughts, just anyone. If not, I want to invite you to join Don and myself in 3 minutes for the last speed networking session of this conference. And also, tomorrow is the last day of the conference, November 10th. We start at noon, 12 p.m. Eastern, with a global recap panel that you don't want to miss. It'll be myself in conversation with 6 of the track leads for the conference, as well as Ross Perry and Lauren Vargas. Will try to have a conversation and try to see what the main themes and threads that bubble up through all the conversations we've had for the past month. And then on the tail of that, at 1 p.m., Don Youngberg will be leading us into an open space discussion. And this is a perfect segue to the global recap. And this is a session where you'll be invited, a little bit like today, to pursue unfinished conversations, new ideas, things that you felt were not included that you'd like to discuss. So I really want to encourage you to join us tomorrow, and in 2 minutes if you want to network.